Welcome to our second conversation about making the case for studying the humanities in a time of crisis. I'm Scott Muir, Project Director for NHA's Study the Humanities initiative. Today, we'll hear from Humanities Center directors representing a range of institutions about the role that Humanities Centers can play in promoting the value of studying the humanities as an undergraduate. We also hope to hear from those of you who are joining us. And if you missed our first conversation, The View from the Dean's Office, we have a recording of that we'll share a link to. We invite all of you to use the chat function to share your own resources and initiatives for attracting more students to the humanities, as well as questions for discussion as they arise. Here at NHA, we've been researching the field of humanities recruitment through the Study of the Humanities initiative, which is supported by the Andrew W. Mellon Foundation. Through our humanities recruitment survey, we've learned about recruitment efforts at diverse institutions around the country. This research has confirmed the humanities community's hunger for recruitment strategies and illuminated opportunities for sharing effective approaches. Through this research and conversations with humanities center directors around the country, we've learned about new ways that humanities centers, many of which have traditionally focused on supporting faculty research, are working to attract more undergraduates to the humanities, spearheading efforts to articulate career pathways, curricular innovations, marketing initiatives, and cohort programs and other activities that foster humanities community and identity. We'll be sharing effective models for all of these approaches through a comprehensive resource on humanities recruitment strategies in the coming months. We invite you to reach out to us regarding your efforts on your campus to promote undergraduate humanities education. We've also been partnering with faculty and administrators across the country to document the impact of their programs in shifting perceptions of the humanities through surveys and interviews with students. We would be happy to explore the possibility of collaborating to document the impact of your initiatives. Finally, we're interested in learning from you about how this landscape is shifting in the context of the pandemic, the crisis in higher education, and the national reckoning over racial injustice. Today, we're excited to discuss how humanities centers are pivoting to adapt to a rapidly shifting landscape to address persistent challenges in undergraduate humanities recruitment. We're very excited to have directors of 3 centers that have been leaders in promoting the humanities to undergraduates on their campuses. We have Jean Allman, J.H. Hexter Professor in the Humanities and Director of the Center for the Humanities at Washington University in St. Louis, and our NHA member representative from WashU. We have Sylvester Johnson, Assistant Vice Provost for the Humanities and Director of the Center for Humanities at Virginia Tech. And we have Peter Knox, Eric and Jane Nord Family Professor and Director of the Baker Nord Center for the Humanities at Case Western Reserve University, and our member representative for Case Western. I'd like to go around and have each of you take a few minutes to share about your center's efforts to attract more students to the humanities before the onset of the pandemic. Jean, would you like to start us off?
Sure. So our center dates back to 2003 was when it was founded. The founding director was Gerald Early. And from the very beginning, there was some focus on undergraduates, but I have to say it was fairly minimal. We did have an honors program for undergraduates, a research honors program, and then very early on, because of the interests of a few key faculty, including Professor Gerald Early, we had ended up with a children's studies minor. When I came on in a decade or so later, there was a lot of faculty pushback. Faculty felt like undergraduates don't belong in Humanities Center. This is about faculty research and public agendas, what have you. And so I was encouraged to rethink this whole model. So I came in on sort of one side, but very quickly shifted to the other side as I worked with our undergraduate honor students. That's a 2-year program where students develop an independent research project that ends up as a published article. And I began to really appreciate that a center could provide a space for undergraduate education unlike any other space on campus, because We could house, for example, minors that if you put them in a department, they immediately become associated with a particular department. So we had faculty come to us, for example, who had a great idea for a medical humanities minor. And we have Washington University attracts a lot of students who want to be doctors or to be in health professions. So this was a faculty interested, undergraduates interested. So now we've launched a few years ago a medical humanities minor, children's studies minor. We expect a urban humanities minor to be in the offing in the next couple of years. And so through that, we've created quite a large space for undergraduates. They're now included on we have an executive committee that advises us, and we have an undergraduate representative on that committee. And we have some dedicated space in the center as well. So we like to think that we're a space for faculty, for graduate students, and for undergraduates sort of equally. So that's kind of, that's sort of a brief overview of what we've got at Washington University.
Thanks, Jean. Sylvester?
Yes, so thank you again for the invitation. Excited to be here. At Virginia Tech, we have been able to engage with undergraduate education in some promising ways. We are a relatively new center, so we just turned 2 years old as a center this month. But we have been, I think, in a very fertile and really nurturing and exciting environment at Virginia Tech. It's a comprehensive university that is well known for its leadership in technology, but that has a range of intellectual offerings across the university, and certainly important strengths in humanistic disciplines and human-centered disciplines. So one of the things that happened early on that has been a terrific opportunity for humanities to capture engagement with our students and the undergraduates is an exciting program called the Calhoun Discovery Program that was created by another center that's run by Thanasis Rakakis. It's the Center for Higher Education Innovation. It received really generous funding from David Calhoun, who is the current CEO of Boeing, because David Calhoun he was an alum of the university. He has been very concerned that it takes a long time in private industry for people to learn to work with other people who come from different expert backgrounds and in order to solve real world problems. And he wanted a much more transdisciplinary opportunity for students, for the future of talent, really, to move through our institutions of higher learning and to go out into the workforce and to be more nimble. And that other center was very deliberate about inviting humanities to be part of what is a transdisciplinary undergraduate program. So this program funds undergraduate students for 4 years to have a seminar, sandbox experience where they work with majors across 9 different program majors. And the students are heavy in STEM, but it's not STEM only. So we have majors who are from liberal arts and human sciences, for instance, who are part of that. But our faculty who are in liberal arts and human sciences are able to teach alongside faculty who come across the university. I actually do some teaching in that program. And it's a really important way of engaging with our undergraduates because they have to solve big challenges. We have our partners from private industry, including nonprofits, who participate in helping to create the learning experience for students and evaluate their work. And Boeing is one of those partners, but there are several others as well. And the students get to see faculty who are in business information technology, who are in humanities, who are in engineering, working side by side, teaching side by side to help them figure out how to address some interesting and pressing challenges. Another thing that we've done is we just received a grant from the Mellon Foundation to create a new minor that is a university-wide minor. We're calling a Tech for Humanity minor that focuses on the importance of humanities, of humanistic expertise in addressing the nexus of technology and humanity, the big questions about AI ethics, the future of democracy, giving technology infrastructure and innovation, Histories and cultures of technology are examples of that. And that minor is something that we are in the process of creating right now. It is going to be an exciting opportunity to really draw on the importance of humanities at Virginia Tech, and also to address a very urgent need in the future of talent. And that is the need for comprehensiveness and particularly human-centered approaches from our students, who are going to be the people who create and who guide our society in many ways. So those are a couple of ways that our Humanities Center is engaging with our students in order to try to elevate humanities, in order to try to invest in their learning and their talent, and also and to do it in a way that certainly shows the urgency and value of humanities, but also in coordination with the rest of our university.
Thanks, Sylvester. Peter?
Sure. Well, the Baker Nord Center for the Humanities at Case Western was established about 25 years ago. And for most of its history, like most other centers, it was primarily engaged in faculty support and public programming. But about 5 years ago, we started to become much more involved with undergraduates education, and especially with undergraduate recruitment. Case Western is a school with very strong programs in medicine, engineering, and sciences in general. And so it has increasingly struggled to attract students who are interested in humanities and to attract students across the campus to the humanities. So the two programs that we started, which are run by our Associate Director, Brian Kleitz now, who's been doing an outstanding job, are the Baker Nord Scholars in the Humanities. This is a program that we started in collaboration with our Office of Admissions. And so we work with them to identify students who are applying to Case Western who have an interest in the humanities, and offer them a place in this program to make them feel as if they will have a home when they get to this campus. Students in the program take a 1 credit hour pass-fail course and a seminar in the humanities, which is run by our Associate Director, Brian. And they meet once a week. Sometimes they meet at the center in order to have a conversation with groups of faculty, department chairs, or other folks from the university. But more typically, Brian takes them out into the community within University Circle in Cleveland, to places like the Cleveland Museum of Art, or downtown to the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, where they get private access to curators and tours of the exhibits, and they learn about the kinds of resources that the university has, but also the community has, to make their experience special and to offer them unique opportunities for their own work. They also then receive a $500 research fund, which they can tap later in their undergraduate careers when they do their senior capstone project in the humanities, and they remain engaged with the center, being invited to functions, to meet with visiting speakers, or to go to performances downtown. We began 4 years ago. The first cohort has just graduated of 10 students. We now take in 30 a year. By the end of 2020, there were 120 Baker Nord Scholars on campus. And we hope to continue to grow the program and to make it kind of a magnet for students to come here. The other thing that we've been doing through our program called Humanities at Work, which is also run by our Associate Director, Brian Kleitz, and our Administrative Director, Maggie Kaminsky, is to connect students in the humanities with career paths in non-academic professions. So this involves a mix of programming with speakers, people who had studied the humanities and gone on to successful non-academic careers in business, law, medicine, the arts, entertainment, what have you. but also hands-on workshops, working with our career services office on how to put together a resume, how to conduct an interview, and how to connect these students with internships, especially summer, but also academic year internships that might put them on a career path that they would find agreeable. And in addition, we've been diverting some of our funding from other forms of support or public engagement to monetize these internships, the unpaid ones, so that students from all backgrounds are eligible to, I mean, as we all know, increasingly this is the way you get into your first job. So between these two programs, I think we are, building some momentum, and they're both now featured regularly in our recruitment materials for undergraduates, and hopefully it's part of making the case on the campus that we value all forms of diversity, including intellectual diversity.
Thank you, Peter, and all three of you for those responses. I wanted to quickly, before we shift to the present moment, ask, Jean, you alluded to this in your response, the kind of relationship between these expanding efforts to promote the value of studying the humanities to undergraduates and the perhaps more traditional role of humanities centers in stimulating, elevating, celebrating, presenting faculty research. And so I'd love to hear any thoughts about the balance there, and if you've seen instances where those two goals really actually reinforce one another rather than being a zero-sum game.
Yeah, I've actually quit thinking about it as a zero-sum game, and I think that by bringing the undergraduates sort of more fully into the center through these interdisciplinary minors that sort of organically emerge from faculty input, we're sort of breaking down the kind of disciplinary silos that so many faculty end up inhabiting, particularly in the humanities. So in that way, I think curriculum impacts faculty, then faculty end up impacting curriculum and begin to work more collaboratively around a number of issues, including graduate education. So all of these sort of bleed into each other. That bleed is an unfortunate term, but blend into each other, especially these days, in ways that are really exciting for us. So it all sort of connects together. And I think right now, at this moment, I know we're going to talk about this in a minute, it's especially important to reflect on, our faculty are looking to the center to help them reflect on undergraduate education in the humanities and what we bring to the table. So it's, yeah, it's exciting, but I can no longer think of it as, well, we're mostly devoted to faculty research agendas, but we have this little undergraduate thing on the side at all. I mean, they're all blended together in a way that makes us all more robust and a bigger part of university life.
Excellent, thank you. Sylvester or Peter?
Yeah, so I think these are very important to be seen as going hand in hand. So I certainly agree, Jean, with your comments about this. And I'll just give a couple of examples. One is the articulation of the value of humanities is, if you ask, or when you ask faculty about why it's important, they will typically include in that, if not start with, why students need to learn X, Y, and Z, why this is important for their education. It's also important to be able to signal to employers that there is tremendous urgency, not just value, but urgency, and the kind of skills and knowledge that students gain from the humanistic disciplines, liberal arts, human sciences, that this is integral to all kinds of issues. And I'll just point back to the example that I gave earlier with this Calhoun Discovery Program. It's transdisciplinary, and the Center for Humanities is the pivotal way that liberal arts human sciences is involved in that. And again, it was deliberate because some of the big questions that we're now seeing become more legible in private industry over things like fairness, accountability, and technology and AI is demonstrating why you need to have people who are really good in the kinds of things that humanists do. And then the other is that if you want to be convincing in explaining the value of the larger enterprise, you can't bracket teaching at universities. There are not too many humanists who are working in a lab as purely research faculty. That's unusual. Most of us are doing teaching, and it certainly is a basis for the revenue of our institutions. So it wouldn't make sense to trivialize it in that way. But also, if you want to message the parents about the importance of the work, you go back to the students. There's also some growing interest in activity in undergraduates in humanities having research experience that can be tied to the research projects that faculty are doing. So we have an office at Virginia Tech, like many universities do, that support those efforts to pair undergraduates who want research experience to faculty who are conducting research. They can be research assistants to them, they can work on a project, they can be mentored, they get some experience doing that, and the faculty members can benefit as well from having some assistance. So that's also, that's been a very successful model of putting into action a complementary way of thinking about the work that our engagement with undergraduate students on the one hand, and the support for faculty research on the other.
Yeah, that's something that we've also been, I won't say struggling with, but coming to terms with in recent years about how to bridge the divide between our undergraduates who are so focused on their coursework and their grades and their career paths, and the kind of activities that go on in faculty research in the humanities and through the center. And so increasingly we've been building student participation into our public programming, like the Cleveland Humanities Festival, which we hope will return on the scene next spring, where students are engaged in programming together with the other 30 or so institutions in the city that collaborate with us on this event. And also working now to put together a certificate program in public humanities so that we can engage students in the kind of outreach that is unique to the humanities and that actually can get them out into the community in ways that can stimulate a continuing interest in their lives down the road.
Excellent. Thanks, all three of you. We have a couple questions that have come in from the audience. I think we have a lot of Humanities Center folks working in Humanities Centers with us. And they asked for a couple of kind of structural clarification questions that I'm going to kind of combine. So first, where do your centers fit in the overall structure of your institution? Are they freestanding? Are they connected to the College of Liberal Arts and Sciences or the library? And then secondly, the staff, your staff structures and how undergraduate programming works into your staff structure. For those who do not have staff working with the center other than the director, where do you recommend starting with undergraduates? So first, just a little clarification about where your center resides within the institution, and then how undergraduate programming sort of fits into the staff structure of your institutions, of your centers.
Well, I can start by saying that when I became director of the Baker Nord Center 6 years ago, and people on campus would tell me to send along congratulations to our staff on a job well done, I would turn around and say, great job, Maggie, because that was the extent of our staff. We have an administrative director, that is Maggie Kaminsky, who handles that side of the business, although she does quite a lot more. We were able to recruit an associate director specifically for our undergraduate programming and undergraduate education, Brian Kleitz, and we have an associate director from the faculty, Daniel Goldmark, from our music department. And that's about it. It's, you know, we camouflage the lack of staff as best we can. We are part of the College of Arts and Sciences. I report to the dean. We do not have a separate facility. We have a suite of rooms in one of the classroom buildings. We are actively canvassing for more support, and there is this prospect of a new facility dedicated to the humanities down the road, but I'm not even optimistic that my granddaughter will see that, but we'll see.
Thanks. Jean, Sylvester?
I'll just say briefly, we're in arts and sciences under the dean, so that's who I report to. The question seems to be specifically about the undergraduate sort of component, and we actually have an ALDAC academic coordinator who both teaches in the children's studies minor, but also coordinates for us so she works with me on the 2-year honors program that produces this original research, and she also serves as the sort of the liaison with the medical humanities as well as children's studies, as I mentioned. So I have somebody who's dedicated to that and has a PhD, and is teaching too in the undergraduate program. So that's how we handle it.
Thanks.
The Art Center for Humanities is housed within the College of Liberal Arts and Human Sciences. Structurally, then it's a college level center. And there's some university level centers and there are departmental centers. So we're within that college. In that capacity as director, I report to the dean of the college. Also serve as assistant vice provost for humanities. And so that's a role in the office of the provost that takes up university-wide implications of humanities. And that has actually been a very instrumental structure that is new at Virginia Tech to enable some very important work to happen across the university and multiple campuses that we have. There's also this question of the staffing. So we have a business manager who's newly hired and a graduate assistant who works with the center. When we started, I was there and I had, for 20 hours a week, I had a part-time assistant who was working with us to get things done. In terms of strategy, I think it can be helpful if you have no staff except the one person who's designated as the head or director or however that's titled. Partnerships with existing programs or entities can be really good because if there is another center or another program that does have a staff person or two, they can work with you to be able to do some things like managing the flow of funds or setting up for events or publishing information to a website. And then some of the things like the fundraising or coordinating or messaging or other work that a director would do for your center could take that end, and those partnerships I found early on have been very instrumental.
Thanks to everyone for your responses there. So we're going to shift gears here and get into some of the questions about the challenges and opportunities that we're seeing in the current moment. Obviously, things are shifting constantly, and there's been a lot of adjustments that everyone has had to make. So I'd frame this as two questions, but I'm going to go ahead and collapse them in terms of where do you see in this moment, with everything that's happening within higher ed, but also everything that's happening in the country, where do you see, what are the challenges you experience as a humanities center, but then where do you also see opportunities and openings for new ways that you can promote the value of the humanities on your campuses? Peter, would you like to start us off?
Sure. I think it's still too early, really, to have a good sense of what the landscape for the humanities is going to be, even in the coming year, and then certainly in the years following. I expect a certain amount of pressure, given the urgencies of the job market, both in the academic job market, but also students and parents worried about their postgraduate careers. I think there are opportunities in the short term as education moves to increasingly online platforms, in part because the kind of teaching that we do in the humanities lends itself better to this medium than, for example, lab-based classes. So we've actually seen in the early enrollment numbers some uptick in the humanities courses at Case Western, partly as a result. But it's too early to tell whether this is a trend or students simply trying to cope with the current situation as best they can. One area where I think we actually are doing better is in outreach to prospective students. So like many institutions, we have open house days for prospective students and for admitted students, and students come to campus and they attend events in the fields that they're interested in, and very often the humanities get short shrift because a lot of our students are, if they're interested in the humanities at all, it's as a double major, and they have to go to the presentation in biochemistry rather than visit the history department. So now that that's been moved online, we've seen participation increase dramatically. I did an event just yesterday for admissions with two of my colleagues, and we had about 50 families tuned in. Typically, we may get 10 to 15 at a campus event. So, so those are some of the practical advantages that maybe we can use. In the meantime, I think given the national dialogue, if dialogue may be too graceful a word to describe it, on that we're engaged in on topics such as race and civility and democracy. I think the importance of informed conversation, the kind of skills that we can give students that work in the marketplace, critical thinking, analytical reading, and articulate communication. I think certainly there's a segment of the population that is very sensitive to the need for these things now. But again, I think with the coming year, there's still just too much confusion about how teaching is going to happen, where it's going to happen, and to really have a clear sense of where we're going.
Thanks, Peter. Jean?
Yeah, well, the challenge is I could go on for 5 or 6 hours if you'd like. We've had a very robust kind of a community engagement set of initiatives, the Divided City Initiative, Urban Humanities, that's funded by Mellon. A lot of that has had to ground to a halt as we try and figure out how to engage community and design and urban design and architecture in a completely different format. We have, we're part of a project in support of emerging scholars in the humanities that partners with 3 African institutions on hold because it's all about bringing people into the same space, and we can't do that. And then, of course, there's staffing. There's the kinds of big events where everybody gets together in the same room. Those are off. And I'm sorry, the Brady Bunch or Hollywood Squares, whatever you want to talk about, this format just isn't conducive. But I think one of the challenge that we've been thinking a lot about is the sort of seminar-based, we deal with really difficult issues, misogyny, racial violence. And when you're teaching those kinds of topic areas, it's to not be in the same room, to not be able to watch students' body language. So I think that there's a way that we need to step back and think about what is our very strength. I think, I agree that we're seeing an uptick in interest in the humanities, which is very different than we saw in 2008, 2009, right? But people are coming to us because students are coming to us because we teach those critical skills that make sense of this world, and they're not easy. And to do them virtually or remotely, where you really have to be so careful about who's being shut down, who's being allowed to speak, it's tricky. So I'll put that down as sort of a curricular or a pedagogical challenge, I think, that requires some really hard thinking on our part. I do think compared to 2008, where the drift then was toward the economic downturn meant professionalization, like if I'm going to pay for this kid to go to school, this kid is going to get a job when they come out. And I think we were a little bit caught off guard by the declines in majors, maybe not in enrollments, but in majors. And I'm not, at this point, I agree with Peter, it's too early to tell, but we're seeing the world is such a mess. Medical hospitals are going bankrupt because people aren't doing elective surgeries. So parts of the economy that seemed absolutely recession-proof are not. And so I think students are kind of stepping back and kind of asking really big questions, and we're really good at helping people figure out answers to really big questions. So I think there's an opening that humanities departments and centers are taking advantage of at the current juncture.
If I could just jump in, I just want to completely agree with that. I think that in fact, the situation today is much more like 1929 than like 2008. And the history of the humanities in the Great Depression was that in fact, students did gravitate more towards our disciplines, in part because in the professions and the technical trades, there just weren't any jobs anyway.
Yeah. Sylvester?
Yeah, this is a great question. And I completely agree with what Peter and Jean have articulated. There's a lot of uncertainty now. There's some surprising, or maybe not so surprising, but for many of us surprising silver linings to things, the ability to reach broader audiences. So in terms of the challenges, I think it's certainly clear that for virtually every educational institution and other institutions, the financial impact of this pandemic is going to be very difficult going ahead. And we may not know exactly what that means at a granular level yet, but it's fair to say that it's going to exacerbate what were already existing vulnerabilities for our institutions of funding, you name it, across the board, all kinds of things, but certainly including the work that happens at these centers and institutes. And maybe with the rare exceptions of very well endowed centers and institutes, for the most part, everyone is going to have to deal with the fallout economically. So that's definitely a challenge. It's already been a challenge at many institutions that have seen things like furloughs and in layoffs, shrinking budgets. And it's important to acknowledge that. In terms of our programming, it's been a big pivot to move programming online. And Jean, you were talking about this, the difference that it makes for interacting when you're not in a physical room with someone, with an audience.
Mm-hmm.
We've evolved to take advantage of all these cues. And so it's not the same whenever you have the interaction on a digital platform. Peter, to your point, though, it is something to consider, I think, in a positive light, that there's more accessibility for some things because there's so many, everyone is teaching online. I mean, people who would never have done it because of whatever philosophical or practical reasons have just been in the situation where this is what they have to do. And we're already hearing from some of our students, for example. We're a multi-sited university, so we have campuses throughout the Virginia Commonwealth. We're already hearing from some of our students that they're so excited to be able to teach course X or Y because now those courses are online. And if they were in Northern Virginia and our biggest campus is in Southwestern Virginia, and that class were offered only on campus in live, a format, they would not have been able to take it. I think that we're also going to see a continuation of something that has emerged as called public interest technology that I think is a very, very important opportunity for humanists, and not just humanists, but it is an opportunity for humanists. So public interest technology university network is a growing coalition of universities and colleges supported by the Ford Foundation and other philanthropic entities working with the New America think tank in order to do something that's really at the center of our conversation. It's connecting research and student outcomes and student learning. And the aim is to do for technology what the Ford Foundation did for law rather in the 1960s. And that was to create more outcomes and possibilities for professional opportunities for people who had expertise in law. Today, we take for granted the idea that people work for nonprofits or they work in government and they have a background in law. But that was actually largely a product of what happened in the 1960s. And the aim is to do the same thing for technology, is to create more career opportunities and support for those career pathways for our students, the future of talent, to go into our society having expertise in technology, and that's broadly defined. So that doesn't only mean that they build robots or write software. It could mean they understand the impact of digital currency on economic systems, or they're really good at understanding inequality and the interface between AI and law enforcement, and they want to create more just structures for more democratic outcomes. We're going to need that talent because it is more obvious now than ever before, and it's easier for more people to recognize today than ever before, that the technology is a comprehensive issue. It's a human issue. It's not just a STEM issue. It's not just a technical issue. And that's the opportunity for humanities to step into that space and say that we're seeing catapulting in some ways towards some of the technology innovation deployment because of this pandemic. And we're seeing that happen in terms of companies' valuations, and you think about the future of labor and the acceleration of automation, for example, that is now has this engine behind it of, well, this can make people safer. If a robot could deliver your package to you instead of a human coming to your front door, that might eliminate COVID-19 infection. But the point is that it then becomes more urgent for us to have the human-centered, humanistic talent to deal with the broad impact that all of this has. I think we're going to see that opportunity grow exponentially. And that is an opportunity space, I think, into which our humanists have to deliberately step in order not just to make for a healthier foundation for our programs and for our faculty and for our students, but to have a society that actually works the way we need it to work.
Thanks to all of you on that question. Great summary of some very difficult challenges, but also some exciting opportunities. I wanted to pivot off of that based on a couple questions, one that came in beforehand and one that just came in. basically talking about the role of humanities centers in communicating to key audiences that affect the recruitment of undergraduates. Parents, funders for humanities centers, policymakers, employers. Obviously, those are very different audiences, but so we can pick and choose from those. But what do you see as the role of centers in making the case for the value of the humanities in light of all the trends that you've talked about in terms of the value for our society, the value for the career force, the workforce of the future? How do you think about those audiences in making that case?
So I think it's very important for us to embrace the messaging and the demonstration. One thing that we're working on right now at Virginia Tech is creating a summer institute experience for students who are in high school before they get into college, and I'll just wax a little stereotypical here, and already decide that they're not going to study humanities or major in it at least, that we actually introduce them to the exciting world of humanistic approaches and humanistic learning within the context of really exciting, difficult, big questions that our society is facing. And so creating that summer institute experience for them is going to be one way that we try to game change the pipeline. They may never end up coming to Virginia Tech, most of those students, but what we aim for is them to then go to college with a very different mindset. Instead of the humanists having to try to convince them after they arrive that they should major in humanities, they come and say, I did this summer institute thing, and we were looking at AI ethics, and I had no idea about the philosophy of technology. This stuff is really interesting. I might need to lead some policy development that's going to happen in the next 5 or 6 years. And from what I can tell, if I take these courses in humanities or do this major, that's going to position me. So that's messaging to those students, but also their parents. That's very important. And when we do that, when we first launch this, it's probably going to be virtual and online. And so that actually in some ways makes it more feasible because it becomes suddenly less expensive for us to start doing this. We don't have to fly people in and lodge them. We just have to get them delivered over the digital platform. With the private industry, I think what we have right now at Virginia Tech is a program that has private industry partners who are in a setting where there are faculty from across our university with a very deliberate inclusion of liberal arts and human sciences that's happening through our Humanities Center. That is a huge game change, because what it means is that it's a situation where we already have a critical mass of private industry partners who would be seen typically as hiring only STEM people, who are supporting an inclusive transdisciplinary way of educating our students that recognizes the importance, and so not just the value, but also the urgency of including the humanistic learning. And when you have partners who hire people, that can help with the message, because they can become your partners in messaging to other private industry entities. And there's nothing like being able to go to parents and tell them, well, if your student comes to this program or participates in this learning experience, they're going to spend 4 years or X number of years interfacing with these really highly visible potential employers who are working with our faculty, who represent the range of talent that we have across the university. So those are some examples of how we can not just try to meet that challenge of messaging to various audience, but I would hope embrace it.
Yeah, I think in a similar vein, we are very keen to try to connect, not just with potential students really, but with their families and also with our own faculty. I think it's the case that certainly, early in my career, it would never have occurred to me that I might be giving career advice to a student who was not interested in an academic career. I didn't know enough about it. I wasn't interested in it, and I didn't see that as my role. So a big part of our Humanities at Work program is also outreach to our own faculty, so that at the very least, a professor like me knows enough to say a few things about the program and to direct the students there. But we're also now, closely involved with the admissions office, and a presentation on career paths from the humanities is a part of every program for prospective students and incoming students run by our associate director, which we call now Pathways to Med School, Wall Street, Silicon Valley, and beyond. It utilizes a lot of the data collected by the NHA in initiatives like Study of the Humanities, which we tailor to our own institution's profile. And we work now also closely with a very cooperative Office of Corporate Relations to build connections to employers, and also to connect faculty in the humanities with employers, because in fact, there are industries out there that are very interested in tapping into that kind of expertise that they find in our philosophy department or history department or religious studies. I think, that it is, the way to avoid, what happened in 2008 and 9 is to, relentlessly foreground all of these issues and the values that humanists bring to the marketplace.
Yeah, and I think also on that, shifting from the 2008, 2009 narrative, I mean, everybody is dealing with immense ambiguity and complexity. And who can see 2 months into the future, much less think that a 4-year degree is going to prepare you for a invulnerable career path, and challenging, the mistaken assumptions that perhaps lead parents and students to lean away from the humanities, perhaps because they're attracted by what may be a pipe dream of a invulnerable credential for an entire career in a century where there's going to be massive disruption, and a need for adaptability and a flexible skill set that can ride the different waves of disruption to the job market that we're going to see. Jean, do you want to tackle the audience's question?
I'll do it real quickly. I'll just say that we have been fortunate. We've worked with admissions, we've worked with arts and sciences. They've invited us to the table to help deliver the message about the humanities, including this summer. We've got an excellent career center that helps us make the case. We highlight the career paths of some of our Kling research students that often take them not into academia. In terms of curriculum, we are developing now, we have this program called the Ampersand program that clusters 4 or 5 courses over the first 2 to 3 years of a student's trajectory. They take the same course. So we're doing one coming out of the divided city that focuses on urban segregation. And that draws students in. It's St. Louis, they may want to be a doctor or a scientist, but they want to be in that program. And so we have them for 4 or 5 classes. We don't know what their major is eventually going to be, but we work with these existing kinds of programs that really are bringing students into a small sort of seminar focused, research focused experience to show them the best of what we do. And we also have a quite large program focused on rethinking doctoral education in the humanities, preparing PhDs for the multiplicity of career outcomes that they end up in once they have their PhD. And that has also sort of come back and helped us rethink some of our undergraduate curriculum as we create these alternative pathways to all different kinds of positions. So that would be my sort of short answer.
Wonderful. Thank you to you all. We are nearing the end of our hour here, and so we're going to prepare to sign off. There were some really great questions that came in. We didn't get a chance to get to all of them, so apologies. But we really appreciate all of you who have joined us. and including those who may join later and view the recording. We hope that you'll reach out and share the things that you're doing on your campuses to promote the value of studying the humanities. And we want to give a big thanks to all three of our panelists here. Jean, Peter, Sylvester, thank you so much. Really excited to be able to highlight and support the work that you're doing on your campuses to promote the value of the humanities. And thanks to everyone for joining us.